Ulawanaka Fiji, and welcome to another episode of For the Record. Fiji and India have been growing closer in bilateral relations and as countries of the world with a common goal. Just a few days ago, the Prime Minister Bainimarama himself reminisced about the visit by his Indian counterpart Narendra Modi about a year ago. In fact, on November 19th last year, to be exact. But to talk about how things have moved forward since the visit by Narendra Modi and how we are capitalizing on that very momentous visit, we have with us in studio Fiji's High Commissioner to India, Mr. Yogesh Karan. Mr. Karan, thank you very much for being here. You've been in New Delhi in India working at our High Commission. After the visit of Mr. Modi, of course, there would have been a lot of communication back and forth, a lot going on behind the scenes. But if you were to give an overall picture of how we have progressed following the visit by the Indian Prime Minister, where do you think we stand at the moment?
Thank you, Edwin, for inviting me to speak to you. The visit by Prime Minister Modi, as you know, it's been quite a long while, 34 years, after the last Prime Minister of India visited Fiji, the late Indira Gandhi. This visit was highly sought and created a lot of curiosity in India. People questioned me, wanted to know that Prime Minister has accepted to visit Fiji. Sometimes you get asked questions. Fiji is a small country, but I think it's not really a matter of size. We had excellent bilateral relations with India, and we have strengthened it over years. After the visit of Prime Minister, and I'd like to thank the media, both Fiji and in India. We had excellent media conference in India before the visit and after the visit. So Fiji had lots of publicity, and you would be aware that the cost of advertising or any advertisement you want to put in both the TV or the print media is very expensive in India. This was an opportunity for us where we were able to market Fiji to the extent. And after the visit, a lot of inquiries have come to my office for trade, even for tourism, and also Bollywood. There's a lot of discussions been happening. To bring trade to Fiji. People have asked our office for data in terms of what India is exporting to Fiji and what Fiji is importing from other parts of the world. So I see that in months and years to come, our trade relations will strengthen more, and also in tourism, I'm expecting a lot more visitors out of India in the forthcoming years.
You made an interesting point about months and years. You expect to see changes. Are you saying that the visit by Prime Minister Modi and the progress that your High Commission has been able to make, you're setting a long-term goal? Is that something you're working on? Can you tell us more about that?
Yes. The reason I mentioned months and years because to promote Fiji in a country of size of India is not an easy task. India has 29 states. And each state is like a country of its own. And with our presence in New Delhi, with the number of staffing, it becomes challenging at times. But nonetheless, and there's the smarter ways of looking at things. We have just opened, as you would know, the honorary consul office, the consulate office in Mumbai, and we appointed honorary consul for Fiji, the first honorary consul for Fiji in Mumbai, and we'll be doing same in Calcutta very soon. In fact, we have identified a person for Calcutta and also for Chennai, and we're looking at other cities, the fast upcoming states like Bangalore and even Hyderabad. So our presence will be much more felt, and I think this would lead Fiji's recognition to another height in India, and I'm very positive that in years to come, more people will know where Fiji is. Sometimes I get very strange questions that people ask that is Fiji in Africa? So we need to market more. We need to put a lot more advertisements. But as I said, it's expensive. But during the visit of the Prime Minister, I was invited to a few of the channels, so it was an excellent opportunity to put Fiji in the global map.
The honorary consuls, Mumbai obviously is the economic capital of
Yes.
India. It drives economies and trade with hundreds of millions of dollars. Was it more so because of the trade potential that Mumbai presents, or more because of Bollywood, or a mix of both?
I guess it's a mix of both. Because, Mumbai is the industrial and commercial hub of India. So we thought to start with Mumbai, and Bollywood, as you know, that films have been done in Fiji, and this person that we've appointed is very well acquainted with both Bollywood and Hollywood. So I foresee that we will have excellent contact to talk about trade in Mumbai, and more importantly, a good A banner films for Fiji. Currently, I'm in discussion with a very good producer who did very good movies in the mid 80s and early 90s.
I suppose it's too early to talk about what exactly this project is.
Yes, I guess so.
All right, fair enough. The other honorary consuls, Calcutta, Chennai, Bangalore, these are up-and-coming states. What potential do you see there?
So when you talk about Bangalore, is virtually IT, and Chennai, very good in medical, very good in agriculture. The south of India, as you know, is very good in agriculture. So there have been few visits by our ministers where I have taken them to see areas such as pharmaceutical production, also in agriculture, the kind of things they do, amazing things they do. They're able to farm prawns in the same plot of land, seawater, 2 seasons, and on the same farm they're able to plant rice in seawater. So this is through extensive research, very high level technological research being done by India. So, and I think we will be able to duplicate that here in time to come.
All right, on that note, Mr. Curran, it's time to take a break. Don't go in here. We'll be right back for more discussions. Good evening and welcome to another episode of For the Record. The recent attack on a 9-year-old girl in Nasinu has shocked and outraged the nation. Many are calling for heads to roll and calling on the authorities to do something. But what a lot of us don't realize is the trauma and the torment that the victims go through and probably have to live with for the rest of their lives. For discussions on this, we have with us in studio tonight Dr. Muriel Allen, a child psychiatrist and assistant professor at the Fiji School of Medicine, as well as Alita Wangambada, the counseling services team leader at Empower Pacific, an NGO that works with victims of sexual assault and rape. Ladies, thank you very much for being in the studio with us tonight. As I mentioned, the recent attack on the 9-year-old girl has brought to the fore something that people say has been a problem within Fiji society for a long time. Alita, I'd like to begin with you by asking your organization, the support services that you provide, how many of these cases would you say comes through Empower Pacific on a yearly basis?
Thank you, Edwin. Empower Pacific has been in operation since 1994, and we started off in Lautoka, and then from then in 2008 we moved across to Suva and then to Lambasa as well. And over the years we've seen, because of our partnership with the Ministry of Health and Medical Services and also the Department of Social Welfare, we have continued to receive cases from both the departments in terms of those that have gone through sexual assault. So I would say that it ranges from time to time, but yes, we are picking up the number of referrals that come through from the Department of Social Welfare.
In terms of the services that you provide, what would you say to people sitting at home and they're watching? What does Empower Pacific actually do?
We are a counseling organization, so we provide counseling support to those that are referred to us. So counseling support meaning basically we listen to the survivors that come through. So listening to them and believing in them. Most of them, they've come, when they are referred, some of them, their own family do not believe that they're telling the truth. So as counselors, we're there, we believe them, we are there, we let them know that we are here to hear their story and validate, the enormous emotional turmoil that they're going through at that time, not just emotional, but psychological as well. So, so it would take from one session to many more sessions of working with the survivor, with the various, the impact that they're going through. So for some of the impact, it could be maybe because the child is start to relive the incident again. They're showing it by, reenacting play with other children as well. So that's when it's been highlighted and it's been referred to us. Other cases where maybe just numbness and avoidance, or sometimes, parents do come and then they say that, they're having nightmares, but not really realizing the cause of why the nightmares were happening. So those are some of the things we start to work with the children and also with the parents. It's very important to have the support of the family so that we can bring about normalcy for this child again. So that normally takes, not just one session, but many, many sessions.
Dr. Muriel, Alita has basically set the framework of what a child goes through if they have been victims of rape and sexual assault. What actually goes on in their minds on a psychological level that leads to these sort of acts? I mean, is it trauma? What is it exactly?
I think it's important for us to first state, when a person is victimized that way, it's a very traumatic experience and they're helpless, they're rendered helpless. So typically, victims of assault or rape, they go through mostly a course that we call post-traumatic stress disorder. And I'd like to explain, probably, understanding that paradigm, you'll be able to explain the behaviors, what happens. But there are factors that are important to consider. One is the age of the child, the developmental, the developmental level, what type of abuse has happened, you see the degree, was it one time, was it ongoing, the abuser or the perpetrator, is he related or unknown to the child, was there physical threat, all these sorts of factors play, But then typically after that, then they develop symptoms of what we call post-traumatic stress disorder, which can last for a few months to over years. And the life of the person will never be the same again. The cardinal symptoms would be like one is persistent experiencing of the event. That is why they will have nightmares. Because again, the memory of that event becomes abnormally absorbed. Because it was so traumatic, the mind cannot deal with it. And to preserve your own sanity or the person's sanity, the mind's defenses are up to swallow that whole memory without, attention to details. So that will also explain a lot of, that's why they will have experiencing, they will have nightmares. There will be also avoidance, if you have been traumatized in this place, they will try to avoid places similar to or even that place where this happened. Another would be persistent hyperarousal or hypervigilance. Like right now, when we heard about this case of this 9-year-old girl, the whole society is traumatized. That's why there's vigilance, and everybody, the parents and all school teachers would like to protect their children. So again, how a person recovers or the acute or chronic effects will depend again on whether there's a supportive environment. Like Alita had mentioned, and it's not uncommon, when a child discloses that somebody did this to me, the parents say they don't believe, and they say, you're lying, your uncle can't do that, maybe it's your fault, maybe it's you who did it. So again, there will be, apart from the psychological effects, these can be manifest in physical effects. Some kids will regress, they go back to bedwetting, they'll be afraid they will have palpitations, they will feel afraid to be left alone. So they will also have low self-esteem. It really changes the whole person's life. And I'd like to point to, it's not only the child or the person, it changes the whole family's life. You know, like if I may proceed, you know, like if the perpetrator is known to the child, it's a little, it becomes more complicated. Because like, it shatters the whole family. Like when you say you are, for example, an uncle or a dad who is supposedly the protector, in a position of trust, that trust is completely shattered. You know, it's like, where else can I be safe? You know.
Unfortunately, it's time to take a break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back and more discussions on tonight's issue. Welcome back to the show. We're talking tonight about the National Development Plan consultations that are ongoing around Fiji, and our guest, National Planning Minister, Mr. Ayasir came. Minister, Fiji hasn't had an NDP, but surely there are neighboring countries which have been through this process. I understand you are seeking assistance from international partners. This document, the NDP, National Development Plan for Timor-Leste, what lessons can we learn from this?
Well, you know, I mean, this is just an example of how a country has set out its development plan. So, for example, you know, they've got one part on infrastructure development. They've got various sections here as to how to develop their tourism sector. They are different to us in the sense, for example, they want to grow the tourism sector. It's not as highly sophisticated as ours, probably quite rudimentary. So they've got a lot of emphasis in what kind of infrastructure they need to provide, what will be the growth areas in terms of tourism and the different segmentation. They've got, for example, a section here on petroleum, energy requirements. They, as we know, have a access to, and I think there's some dispute with Australia at the moment, in terms of the gas and the oil reserves that lie between Australia and Timor-Leste. We obviously would have a different approach to petroleum because we don't actually have any reserves, nor have we discovered any, nor do I think there's anything in the horizon from the reports that we have got, or under the ground, But so, there obviously would be a lot of focus on, for example, renewable energy. There would be a focus on, what are the energy requirements of Fiji? There's some projections that Fiji's population would be 1 million people by 2035, I think, from memory. So, when Fiji's population becomes 1 million, then, how do we cater for those pressures that's on infrastructure? Obviously, we all talk about development. If more people are going to have television sets and air conditioners because the place is doing well, it means more electricity. So it means FEA needs to produce more electricity. Does it have the capacity to produce it or not? If it needs to produce it, where will they get it from? Can they get three-phase power, for commercial and industrial purposes? We have got some complaints, for example, at the moment in Ba, where a couple of the companies want to put up large-scale factories, but they're having problems with FEA. So, this is how we are sort of looking through the NDP. What are the real specific areas we need to address? In particular, if you're talking about development. What this also does, very importantly, is that it sets out in a very transparent manner where we're heading towards. And it also means that our development partners, so whether it's, AusAid, New Zealand aid, US aid, whether it's World Bank, IMF, whoever it is, European Union, they say, oh, okay, this is what these people want. These are the priorities. Where can we assist them, or how can we assist them? You see, because one of the dangers always is for any donor country, any development partner, is that they don't simply want to throw money away. So your opportunity of attracting more development funds is enhanced if you have something that's quite concrete. Mm-hmm. So they may be able to say, well, this year, because they have their own budgets too, so they may say, well, this year, we have only about $100 million available for aid. Who do we give it to? If they go to a country that does not have a development plan, does not have a vision, and a country that does, guess who they'll give their money to? And they can also say, well, in 3 years' time, maybe we can assist them in this area because that's what they want. So, the question always has been asked is that not development for what or development for who. I mean, there's a kind of perennial question. And if you look at all sort of development theories, that has always been a struggle. You need to have development not for the sake of it. You need to have development for the sake of ensuring that it fulfills the needs and the wants and the demands of the actual people. So this is specifically what it is doing. And we also need to, as government, be able to have our own input into it. So, for example, we may see if there's, like Nambuwal to Draketi, the road is being done. Now that suddenly opens up that part of Vanuatu. So people are already talking about a township for Nambuwalu. Now, what does that mean for government? It also means that we need to provide street lighting. If there's going to be a small township developing, we need to provide sewage and water and electricity. So these are the mechanisms through and the priorities that we will be working through these consultations.
Speaking of the consultations, 432 already, if not more. What are some of the more striking issues coming out of these talks? As you mentioned, infrastructure development and basic amenities would be some of them, but what stands out for you?
Well, there's some key areas. I mean, like some of the rural areas where people have actually said that they want more field officers from agriculture to come to them.
It's a very specific request.
They said we want them to come and help us to grow our products better, help us to manage our livestock better, and we need more of these people. And they want access to markets specifically. We have, we have specific requests for better accessibility of government services. It's health services, schools, administrative approval requirements, kind of decentralization of decision making. We have the usual sort of access to water, electricity, roads. We have, for example, in Bua, they want to improve coverage of telecommunications in Bua. There are certain parts, obviously, that are not forming part of network coverage. You see that this fits in well with the government's agenda to have access to universal service access funds that we have as part of a fee that we levy on telecommunications company. So we want to use these funds to be able to, as we've advertised last year or year before last, where we've identified black spots and we have brown spots. So black spots obviously have absolutely no coverage. So how do we get mobile phone companies to set up towers? Because you see, the reality is a mobile phone company, if there's, for example, one village, and there may be 50 people or 20 people living in that village, but to set up the tower, because it may be somewhere in a valley, to set up the tower and get the service, it may cost them $500,000 or maybe $1 million. So they look at the sums and say, well, 30 people, 50 people in the village, even if they use $10 a week, 50 multiplied by 10 is only 500. And we have to spend $1 million. So they won't go in those areas. So that's where government comes in, provides the subsidy, reduces the impact on their balance sheet in terms of the capital investment. So we provide for the capital investment, and they actually focus on the services.
All right. Now, we are about to come to the end of the segment, but very quickly, once the NDP is done, how is that going to affect policy development for the government?
Well, they obviously, it's prioritization in terms of setting the roadmap through the NDP. So government will always fit in the budget requirements and budget formulation through the NDP. It obviously cannot address 100% of every specific budgetary announcement, but it provides a general guideline. And we also want it to be specific to be able to say, this type of infrastructure must take place in 4 years. So when we come to that 4 years, even before the 4 years is up, we know exactly this is where we're heading towards. So that also helps us to ensure that we have a much better mechanism in terms of the formulation of the budget.
All right, and we will take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the national minimum wage and the increases in the 10 sectors that were implemented a few days ago. Mr. Kumar, let's focus now on the 10 sectors. These are covered by regulations. There have been increases on this front as well. Give us an overview of which sectors we're talking about and what sort of changes have come in.
Thank you, William. Yes, when we talk about the 10 sectoral minimum wage, this has been there prior to the national minimum wage came into effect. Now, the 10 sectoral minimum wage has been there for a long, long time. We had the security services, manufacturing, printing industry, building and civil road transport, manufacturing, mining and quarrying, and sawmilling, logging. All these industries has been there. Now, with this national minimum wage being increased, there is also increase in the 10 sectoral minimum wage from 2 to 5%. We have seen that, for example, in terms of security industry, the previous rate was $2.41 an hour. That is now increased to $2.51 an hour. So this is a increase of around 10 cents per hour. Of course, this is going to benefit those security officers. Like that, we have got all other sectors which have increased in the minimum rate of pay. So what we have noted is that those employees that have been paying the workers on the minimum rate will need to increase the minimum rate of pay. Now, those employees which have been paying above the minimum rate, they don't need to worry. This also brings in terms of the workers and the employees can then come back, and those employees who have been paying above the minimum rate, they can always come back to the negotiation table and say, look, we can review our rates. Even though we are paying above the minimum rate, we can also review this. So there is also good faith provisions within the employment license promulgation where both the employer and the worker can sit down, discuss their terms and conditions, and of course they can always benchmark from the national minimum, from the minimum rates of pay if they are paid above the minimum rate.
The Employers Federation, they put out a brief statement after the decision, and they said they were ready for the national minimum wage, but they weren't aware that there were going to be increases in the 10 sectors as well. Care to shed some light on that?
Yes, I think in 2012 we had the Employment Relations Advisory Board. On the 1st of August 2014 we had the Employment Relations Advisory Board. Actually in that the trade unions, the representative from trade unions, the representative from the Employees Federation, of course government, agreed on the review of the sectoral minimum wage. That's very, very important. And of course, this is in line with ILO Convention 144 in terms of the tripartite consultation. So this is in line with those conventions, and of course, with that, government has taken that on board, and that has the Minister for Employment has been advised on that, because the Employment Advisory Board advises the Minister. Okay. So with that coming into effect, with that, of course, then these rates have come into effect. So there has been consultation done to the tripartite partners, and they've all agreed to it in the Employment Advisory Board.
So at that meeting in 2014, when the Employment Advisory Board met, these decisions were taken, and over the following months, the ministry, your department carried out its work. What exactly happened after that meeting?
Of course, in terms of the consultation process, the tripartite partners agreed on the review. With that, of course, with the agreement, then of course the ministry has actually gone through in terms of ensuring that we provide the necessary research, and of course with that the decision has been taken. Of course, it has been taken to government, as government has approved on the increase of the national minimum wage, and of course with that the 10 sectoral minimum wages.
For the 10 sectors, what's involved in carrying out the review? How do you assess what would be an appropriate increase? Of course, I understand the advisory board would sit down and discuss it, but before this discussion would take place, there would have to be some indication of what sort of increase is commendable. Does the Labour Ministry do some research on this? How is this done?
Thank you, Edwin. The two very important factors, of course, is one, the formulas, of course, the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, and the LPG, of course, is the annual growth rate of labor productivity. These are two factors that has been actually been used, the percentage has been used in terms of the sectoral minimum wage rate, and how it's going to be calculated and computed, so that when the rates come into effect, we can show them in terms of the formulas that were used. So these are some of the basics that were actually used in terms of ensuring that we have just and fair minimum wage rate.
And this is accepted by all parties?
Yes, of course.
The formula itself?
Yes.
Now, moving on from now that the decision has been made, so far as the informal sector is confirmed, the national minimum wage, we've discussed most of the employers are paying above rate or they have come on board with the new rate. Is it a similar case or similar situation with the 10 sectors, or is there more work needed here?
Yes, thank you, Edwin. In terms of the 10 sectors, these 10 sectors, the rates has been there for a long time. We have got the minimum rates that has been reviewed over the years, and employees are well aware in terms of the minimum rates of pay. It's just a matter of, for example, in terms of the wholesale retail industry, it's just a matter of for an employer in that industry to adjust their rates, because the previous rates were there. It's just that these rates has now been increased from previously. In terms of the wholesale retail sector, the previous rate was 2.97 cents an hour, and now that has been increased to 4 cents an hour. So the employer need to adjust that in terms of from 2.97 to 3.4 cents an hour. So with that into effect, we have also seen that through our the inspection and compliance, we have seen that of course, yes, majority of the employers have been paying on the national minimum, on the minimum rate, or most of them have been paying above the minimum rate. So those who are paying above the minimum rate, it's up to them. If they want to increase, that they can discuss with the employees. But those which are paying on the minimum rate of pay, they need to increase it. For example, in wholesale retail sector, from 2.97 cents, the rate must go up to 3.4 cents an hour. That's in terms of the regulations of the wholesale retail order.
Is there any adjustment period? Because the rates have come in 1st of July. The employers need to be paid on these new rates. But can an employer say, I didn't know, give me some time to adjust? And if that is the case, do they need to backdate the pay, or do they start from the day that they found out?
The rates have come into effect from 1st of July. That means the worker must be paid from 1st of July. And of course, in a situation where the employer is unable to pay the rates, then of course they need to backdate it to 1st of July. And what we encourage employees is they must ensure that from 1st of July, these rates are all adjusted. And with this into effect, the inspectors will be going in any situation where we see that an employer has not adjusted the rates, we will calculate the difference. And of course, with that, the employer will also be given the penalty notice, because the rates have come into effect on 1st of July, and it is important, it's the law that the employer must increase the rate to the sectoral minimum wage.
I understand that over the last year or so, when the initial minimum rate came in, your department was successful in identifying some employers who weren't complying. What exactly happened, and how did you deal with this?
Yes, Edwin, there were some employers, of course, who were not complying with the minimum rates at that time when the national minimum wage came into effect. So we have conducted awareness to these employees, and we have also inspected their books and backdated from the time the national minimum wage came into effect.
Mr. Kumar, if I may just pause you for a while. We've come to the end of another segment, so we'll carry on discussions in a bit. It's time to take another break. Don't go anywhere. Good evening and welcome to For the Record. It's the holy month of Ramadan for Muslims, a time dedicated to fasting, peace and self-reflection. But a number of Muslim states around the world are embroiled in war and turmoil even during this sacred time in the Islamic calendar. Tonight's discussion is about the terrorist group Islamic State, or IS, as it's better known around the world. Of course, you could say that we in Fiji are worlds away from that conflict, but the reality is the influence of IS has reached our region. It's in our backyards, so to speak. Australia has one of the highest rates of recruitment for the Islamic State. To find out why, we have in studio with us Imam Afroz Ali, a former Fiji resident and one of the leading clerics in Islam. Brother Afroz, thank you very much for making time to be with us tonight. I suppose I've led into the first question. How much of a risk is Islamic State for this region, for Fiji and our neighboring countries?
Well, firstly, thank you very much for inviting me to this show, and I think it's a very important topic that we need to talk about and have a public discussion about this. Within the region, we are seeing that this is, in fact, the reach of ISIS is well established. Whether this, in fact, actually affects Fiji at this point of time, I think is, I don't want to say yet to be seen, because we don't want to see this, in fact, occurring through such a wonderful country like Fiji. However, there is evidence that, in fact, people from within Fiji, in fact, have been accessing videos and information about ISIS, which is not necessarily available to the public, but you'd actually have to have contact with people who may be involved with ISIS in terms of recruitment. So it is a matter that we need to be alert about, but not necessarily be alarmed about as far as it is concerned here in Fiji. Certainly in Australia and within New Zealand, etc., this matter is well established that, in fact, people are involved. And we obviously have recruits who actually are fighting in Syria and Iraq, as well as those who actually have been killed, without a doubt, in the war that continues to be in that region.
You and others like you, senior clerics, senior members of the Muslim community, have started a movement to against IS. Not a violent movement, but something that goes around the world and talks about what Islam really means. And you're in fact trying to reach out to these recruits, to these people fighting for IS. I mean, what exactly is this movement about?
You're absolutely right. The only answer to violent movements is intellectual education and discourse. For people to actually know at the heart level, rather than at the brain level, that in fact violence is not the solution. So the work of, say, for example, the National Imams Consultative Forum within Australia, as well as the international endorsement of scholars for over 126 muftis and major jurists who exist as the core body of Muslim scholars around the world, have in fact done an incredible amount of work to actually put together information to refute the claims of Baghdadi, particularly his claim in terms of what ISIS in fact actually stands for. And one of the papers, called the Open Letter to Dr. Ibrahim Awad al-Baghdadi and to the fighters and followers of the self-declared Islamic State, is endorsed by approximately 126 scholars from around the world. You can in fact download this paper from lettertobaghdadi.com, and available for the public to see as well. And whilst the letter is directed to Baghdadi, the important matter is that it is directed to those who may be easily recruitable, for them to be able to see what does Islam truly say based on the claims of what Baghdadi says that ISIS is based on. So this whole idea about, say, for example, taking slavery, the idea of actually chopping people's heads off. What does Islam say about this? What is the evidence behind this, despite the claims made by all sides, including Muslim terrorists who in fact are involved in much killing that actually is occurring in Iraq and Syria.
For those of you who may not be aware, al-Baghdadi is the leader of the Islamic State, and the man behind much of the fighting that's going on in certain parts of the Middle East, Iraq and Syria, as mentioned by Imam Afroz. Now, of course, you've sent out the letter. You're trying to stop people from being recruited, mostly young men.
That's correct.
Who follow Islam.
Unfortunately,
what's the attraction?
Yeah, just very quickly, young men and a small number of young women who in fact have been attracted to this adventure of war, unfortunately. The attraction is by far and large a rebellion to society that the youth are feeling. I must say that at the first instance, the general youth community around the world, regardless of religion, are actually asking some very legitimate questions in relation to the problems that actually occur because of the politics of war through the governments of the world. This is something that we can't neglect, that in fact there is a politics of war going on that is not safe for anybody. Much of political bias that actually occurs from this leads the youth to actually ask many questions. That usually is the first step by which you then have those troubled youth, particularly who are coming from well-established psychologically disturbed backgrounds, who then want to seek an identity because the society have rejected them. And then you put the volatile mix of selected religious passages. It gives you a sense of purpose. And then you put to that temptations of money, because ISIS pays its soldiers, if you could even call them soldiers, including even marriage, for example. So you have youth out there who are looking for some adventure, looking for, unfortunately, sexual encounters, money, etc. These are the things by which ISIS are attracting the youth in that regard. There is not a single evidence that there are those who are well established in Islamic scholarship is actually in ISIS. It's only those people who are far removed from Islam, happen to be Muslims, but are people who are either involved in existing criminal activity within their own countries and therefore apparently running away from their responsibilities and then seeking a place where they can actually have the ability to respond in a rebellious way. And what better place than a place of war?
Imam Afroz, we have to take a break now. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Good evening. I'm Nemani Delembetiki of the Fiji Sun. Welcome to Fiji's only TV editorial show. In my say this week, I'm going to speak about what could be your goal or New Year resolution. This has been an incredible year. We have achieved so much as a nation in terms of national development and economic progress. But what remains as a blight on us as a people is the unprecedented level of violence in the home against women and children. The Prime Minister of Bainimarama has described it as totally unacceptable. It is a crisis and a national shame. So much so that he has been using public forums to speak out against this scourge on our nation. The victims are innocent, the weak, and the vulnerable. If you have been regularly watching my say, you will have noticed that I have repeatedly stressed the importance of the family. And this is why. The family is the cornerstone or the building block of a nation. It is one of the important cylinders that power our nation. When a family disintegrates because of abuse and violence, it weakens structures that prop up a nation. The family is the basic organization of the nation, community, and the church. I join our PM in expressing my deep concern about the quality of the lives of our people as husbands and wives, and as parents and children. There is too much of criticism and fault-finding, with anger and raised voices. The pressures we feel each day are tremendous. Husbands come home from their employment each day tired and short-tempered. Unfortunately, most of the wives work. They too face a serious challenge that may be more costly than it is worth. Children are left to seek their own entertainment, and much of it is not good. We must work at our responsibility as parents, as if everything in life counted on it, because in fact, everything in life does count on it. If we fail in our homes, we fail in our lives. No man or woman is truly successful who has failed in his or her home. I ask you men, particularly, to pause and take stock of yourselves as husbands and fathers and heads of households. Pray for guidance, for help, for direction, and then follow the whisperings of the Spirit to guide you in the most serious of all responsibilities, for the consequences of your leadership in your home will be eternal and everlasting. Then there are the elements in our communities who inflict pain and suffering on others with blatant disregard of the sanctity of life and human dignity. They prey on the young and innocent for instant self-gratification. The problem requires a concerted effort by faith groups, community leaders, social groups, non-governmental organizations, and other stakeholders to rid our society of this terrible evil. Let's review how we fared this year, and let's learn from our experience. We all agree there is room for improvement in every life. May I suggest the following? Number 1, let's resolve to become a better person, a little kinder to any we meet who may be in distress. Number 2, I hope that we will be a little more helpful to those who are in need. Number 3, a little more worthy of people's trust and confidence. Number 4, that we become better husbands, better fathers and grandfathers, or better wives, mothers and grandmothers. 5, let us be better neighbors and friends. And we can do it because we are all equal and created in the image of God. We have the potential to rise to the divinity within us because we have His Spirit, His spiritual DNA. If we live by God's principles contained in the Holy Writs, we must be good people, for we will be generous and kind, thoughtful and tolerant, helpful and outreaching to those in need and in distress. We can either subdue the divine nature and hide it so that it finds no expression in our lives, or we can bring it to the front and let it shine through all that we do. I take this opportunity to wish everyone a happy and prosperous New Year. I am Nemani Ndelembetiki of the Fiji Sun, and that was my say this week. For more of my views, you can read the Fiji Sun. See you next week.